Admired in avant-garde circles, Gauguin was still largely unknown, still poor, still hungry, and determined to push his art further. In the spring of 1889, the Paris World's Fair gave him his chance. 28 million people attended the large-scale celebration of the centenary of the French Revolution. Displays included conventional European art, pavilions celebrating scientific and industrial inventions and novelties, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, including the sharpshooter Annie Oakley, played to packed houses. Clustered around the fairground were attractions, including reconstructions of villages peopled by native subjects of colonies in Africa and Asia. Gauguin frequented the fair, watching the dancers of Java, and was fascinated by the reconstructions of Asian temples. But it was Tahiti that ultimately caught his attention. Tahiti had long taken root as an earthly paradise in the European imagination. More than a century earlier, the French explorer Louis-Antoine de Bougainville had published a glowing account of his visit to the island in 1768, likening it to the Garden of Eden.
Nature has placed it in the most beautiful climate in the universe. The inhabitants are handsome, tall, and strong. They form perhaps the happiest society that exists on the globe. The beauty of the landscape, the purity of the air, everything inspires voluptuousness.
Tahiti seemed perfect to Gauguin. Now in his early 40s, he wrote to his wife,
"May the day come, soon perhaps, when I'll flee to the woods on an island in Oceania, there to live on ecstasy, calm, and art. There, in Tahiti, in the silence of the beautiful tropical nights, I will be able to listen to the soft murmuring music of the movements of my heart, in amorous harmony with the mysterious beings around me. Free at last, without financial worries, and able to love, sing, and die."
Gauguin landed in Papeete, the Tahitian capital. He arrived wearing a hat he'd picked up at Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. But the Tahiti Gauguin encountered in 1891 had changed drastically from the Tahiti described so rapturously by the 18th century explorers. Far from France, it was also far from paradise. Now a French colony, life there had been transformed by bureaucrats and missionaries, and by the European scourges of smallpox, influenza, and alcoholism. Within days, Gauguin's illusions about Papeete were stripped away.
Tahiti is becoming completely French. Little by little, all the ancient ways will disappear. Our missionaries have imported much hypocrisy, and they are sweeping away part of the poetry.
Not finding the Tahiti he expected, he began to paint the Tahiti of his dreams. Christian missionaries had persuaded the Tahitians to adopt modest, baggy smocks, but Gauguin restored their sensuous sarongs, called pareos. He showed his subjects in harmony with nature, healthy and at peace in beautiful landscapes, taking them back to a past he was passionately hoping to recover.
Will I succeed in finding a trace of this so distant and so mysterious past? To rediscover the ancient hearth? To revive the fire in the midst of all these ashes?
His Tahitian paintings often elude meaning. The figures are lost in their own thoughts, rarely interacting with each other. Titles ask questions that are left unanswered. What? Are you jealous? Where are you going? Why are you angry? Asked about the meaning of the dream, Gauguin replied,
"Everything is a dream in this canvas. Is it the dream of the child, the mother, the rider on the path, or the artist.
A sinister quality creeps into many of these works. Gauguin was drawn not just to the idea of a peaceful paradise, but to the wild undercurrents of his new world. The Tahitian spirit of the dead, the Tupapau, haunts several of these works. In Manao Tupapau, the spirit of the dead keeps watch. He depicted the troubled state of his young mistress after his late-night return from a trip to Papeete.
Tehura lay motionless, naked, belly down on the bed. She stared up at me, her eyes wide with fear, and she seemed not to know who I was. Perhaps she took me for one of those legendary specters, the Tupapaus, that filled the sleepless nights of her people.
Similar spirits appear elsewhere in Gauguin's work. In Words of the Devil, an evil spirit stares out from the painting. The nude's modest pose suggests Eve after the fall, covering her nakedness and shame. But the traditional symbol of temptation, the serpent, is now a Tupapau. The theme of the fallen Eve recurs in Delightful Land, where Eve holds a flower instead of an apple, and a strange winged lizard replaces the serpent. Apples and snakes were unknown in Tahiti, but for Gauguin, original sin and humanity's fall from grace were universal.